Should the Dallas Cowboys add recently released running back Dalvin Cook to their roster before the playoffs? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're answering your Twitter questions. We've got a ton to get through. You guys always give us such good questions. Yeah. But the first one, Landon, we have to get to because I think about 17,000 people asked us, including we'll go with Jonathan here. Should the Dallas Cowboys sign recently released running back Dalvin Cook?
Well, first of all, I think what we should be kind of talking about is what would we be signing him for? I mean, I don't know that, like, I've seen a lot of comments online, suggesting that, they should sign him and make him the starter and start him over Pollard. And it's like, I think people, as usual, kind of look at the name and not the body of work, especially the lately body of work. Dalvin Cook has not been Dalvin Cook wasn't the same player when he went to the Jets. And I think that's why the Jets didn't play him very much. It's not like they had a dearth of incredible players in their teams that they just, listen, Breece Hall was injured for a good portion of while Dalvin Cook was there, and Dalvin still didn't get a ton of carries, So I think that they kind of got an idea of exactly what they had in Dalvin Cook. And I think his production reflects that. Again, not a great team that could afford to bench a good player. And I think that you look at what he has left, and it shouldn't be a comparison of as to whether or not he should be replacing Pollard. I mean, that's just not even the conversation. The conversation should be, is it worth having someone like Dalvin Cook on the roster as your third backup or second backup in conjunction with Rico or Deuce, who's now on the IR, but a third running back situation, right? And I tend to think that it's not, just simply because you like what you've got in Rico Dowdle, you like what you got in Pollard. I don't think that Cook is a better runner at this point than either of those two players. He probably has more balance to his game because he's an experienced vet. He knows how to catch the passes. He understands offense. He understands how to pass protect. But those aren't really the roles of someone that you're signing to a second or third running back contract. You need those guys to play special teams. That's not something that Cooks is going to do. It's just not really a good fit. And then all that on top of the fact that, I think John Owning did a great job of pointing out that the Cowboys are not really an outside zone team anymore, the way that they had been in the past. And that's really where Dalvin Cook had kind of made his money, is running outside zone. So I tend to think that, it's just not a great fit money-wise, situation-wise, talent-wise at this point. But I understand it's a running back when you feel like you got a couple banged up guys and it's at the end of the season. It feels like that could be a potential move. It's just not really a good fit.
One of the telltale signs that a running back is in decline is how well do they do after contact, right? Because for the most part, you're going to get what's blocked for you. It's, can you make plays after you've been hit in the backfield or after you've been hit by a linebacker? According to Pro Football Focus, he ranks third worst in the NFL this year in yards after contact per attempt, 2.21 yards. If you just go based off pure rushing grade, 61 out of 61 qualifying running backs. He also has the lowest gap grade among all running backs in the league, 49.1. I mean, listen, Dalvin Cook was a really good player. He was a Pro Bowl running back, but there's been a lot of injuries, and it's probably he was drafted in 2017. We're in 2024 now. I think it's over.
I think these are all good numbers that you should be hearing Marcus on, right? Like I think we're hearing a lot of of quotes of yards per carry, just kind of uncontextualized yards per carry, which is not exactly a good measurement. And I think part of the issue that we've had with what's going on with Pollard's production, that has to do with how the offensive line is blocking, and that's not something that Dalvin Cook is going to come in here and solve unless he's playing tackle, and I'm not aware. So yeah, I think that you look at the situation. There are kind of advanced metrics here to kind of help measure the quality of a running back separate of their blocking, and then you just go and watch the tape. Like that's really the thing, and just see how the guy is able to kind of get out of situations where the blocking's bad. How does he react when the blocking's good? Is he able to get more than what's blocked when the blocking's good? And I just think Cooks right now is a name that got a very good advertisement from Ian Rappaport in the form of a tweet from what should have been basically from Cooks' agent. So
Yep.
yeah, I just don't know that it's a fit, and it certainly isn't something that the Cowboys need to concern themselves too much with, honestly.
Now, the only reason that it's at least somewhat entertaining to me, or I would entertain the idea, is if you thought he was a significant upgrade as like a pass blocker in a receiving down back. I still think Pollard is a really good receiver. I know he had a bad game against Detroit. He missed a catch on a Texas route that would have gone a long way.
Two of those Texas routes, frankly, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But he's really improved as a pass blocker. And I think Rico Dowdle has done a better job as the season has gone on as a pass protector as well. And then Hunter Lipke has actually done some of that work, over the last couple of weeks. I just don't know. Would you want to sign a running back who obviously wouldn't be able to play this week and then trust them in a playoff game without playing at all to be like your guy on 3rd and 8 to pick up a blitzing linebacker? Probably not. I'm always open to the idea of bringing in veterans later in the season. We'll talk about that, later on in the show, but I just don't think this one makes sense.
Yeah, this one specifically, it's just not a good fit for all the reasons we mentioned. Just on the team building wise, it's just the Cowboys aren't going to be replacing Pollard with Cooks, and that would be the only situation, or maybe Rico, right? You're replacing Rico with Cooks. If you're actually replacing your running back 1 or 2, then maybe you're making some sense. But both of those players, in my mind, are frankly, significantly better players than Cooks.
Now, if Rico wasn't healthy and he wasn't going to be healthy from the playoffs, I think that's a different conversation. But just based off everything we've heard,
the roster moves and everything,
it just seems like he's going to be ready for round 1 of the playoffs at worst, right? Like there's a chance he plays this week. I would expect him to go this week. Maybe we'll see more Malik Davis, who they could pull up for the practice squad. But I think you and I are both in agreement. Probably doesn't make sense for Dalvin Cook. For the Cowboys to sign him. Now, if you want to pick him up and like stash him for the 2024 season, maybe that's different and just kind of see what he looks like after a year off or whatever. But I think for this year, I'm good.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. All right, let's move on to some more questions, including the best possible outcome for the Cowboys in the playoffs. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so that you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, all you have to do is create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Landon, our next question is from at Blair Dunn 9. He wants to know, what is the best case scenario for the Cowboys in the playoffs as far as opponents?
Whew. Of what's possible. Well,
Of what's possible.
I mean, the problem with that is that just the the combinations are pretty endless. Listen, I know I've seen a lot of debate online about, you know, getting the 5th seed versus getting the 2nd seed and the prudence of those two things.
Wild.
That's a wild conversation to me. Look, simply for the situation that, look, I know you may not want to play this team or play that team, but getting the 2nd seed means that you get to play at home until you play anybody but San Francisco.
Yep.
And like, that's not worth avoiding a decent playoff team. Like, I think I've been pretty clear about my feeling about this from the get-go. You shouldn't feel the need to avoid conflict at the end of the season and feel the need to try to avoid playing good teams in the playoffs. Like you do what you can to get your playoff seeding to kind of bolster your own position, but you can't be scared to play good teams. You're in the playoffs and trying to win the Super Bowl. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't think that the difference in how the Rams are playing versus how the Buccaneers are playing is so severe that I'm giving up home field advantage.
Absolutely not. Knowing in the way that the Cowboys play at home versus playing on the road, right? Like that just, it's not even close for me. Now let's talk opponents and paths. So assuming the Cowboys are the 2 seed, whether they win or the Eagles lose on Sunday, there's 3 possible outcomes who they could play. The most likely is the Rams. Second most likely is Green Bay. The third most likely is Seattle. I've got to believe that Seattle is going to be eliminated. I think Seattle, the only way they can get in the playoffs is if they win and Green Bay loses. I think that's the only way, which is possible, by the way, because Green Bay does play Chicago. So not ruling that out. But of those 3 teams, which one do you think the Cowboys match up the best against?
I mean, I think that, they match up the best against. I mean, I have to say the Rams. Listen, I understand the Rams are playing very good football right now, but I kind of still feel like just like the matchups make some sense there. You've got a quarterback who is very good. All these teams have got quarterbacks who are very good, right? I think that Jordan Love is playing at a level right now that is, ascending. He's played very good football this last month. He's got some athleticism to him. He can escape and he can get the ball down the field. We've seen what Geno Smith can do. I think that, if he's back and he's healthy, now that I'm talking about it, it may be Seattle. I think it's probably, to me, I mean, I think it's all pretty similar. Look, even Green Bay. I have worries about Green Bay and that offense in the way that it's kind of picking up steam a little bit. I understand they don't quite have the skill players that they need yet, but they've got a talented quarterback who has really played well in the last month. I think with the Rams, you've got a pass defense that the Cowboys can throw the football on if they can pass protect up front against, obviously, Aaron Donald and one of the best young rookie defensive tackles in football. And then Seattle, it's like they have a pretty solid defense at times, it feels like. The Cowboys are able, obviously, to throw all over the yard on them in Dallas. But you worry about Geno Smith and that passing attack coming back in here. And they certainly aren't going to be afraid of throwing the ball against Dallas. So it's hard. Tough. Yeah.
Well, so the way that I keep going back at it is generally you want to avoid good quarterbacks, like if possible, right? And it's Stafford, Love, and Geno. And I'm not sure who's the worst quarterback of those 3. I think Stafford's the best, probably, like on a week-to-week basis. But we've seen Jordan Love has some awesome games. And then Geno played great against Dallas. He played really well last week against Pittsburgh. So that part of it's hard. Then it comes back to the defense for me, which, funny enough, you look on paper, it's probably the Rams that have the least amount of talent outside of Aaron Donald. But over the last month, they've played the best, and it's not even been close. I mean, Seattle just gave up over 450 yards at home to Pittsburgh last week. Green Bay, a week ago, got absolutely shredded by Bryce Young and the Panthers. And a week before that, Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers put up 38 points on them. So it's really hard. Part of the reason I think it's the Rams for me is I was gonna say Rams fans don't travel. They don't even travel to SoFi to go watch their team. So like I just think if it's a Cowboy Rams game in Dallas, that's 100% Cowboy fans. But if it's Packers Cowboys, I think you're gonna get a good chunk of Packer fans there, which wouldn't make a difference, but I kind of lean the Rams here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is that all these three teams have interesting offenses, but all three of them, they got problems on defense.
That's the thing is all three of those teams have major issues on defense. And with the Rams, it's Aaron Donald and it's not great. At least with Green Bay.
Kobe Turner, basically.
Yeah,
right?
At least with Green Bay, and I know their defense has struggled. They still have Kenny Clark and Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary and Jair Alexander's coming back. At least they have more blue chip guys. Maybe.
There's another coin flip between now and the playoffs. So who knows what may happen to Jair Alexander. So I mean, I think it's tough, but I do think that, looking at these lineups and the potential teams that you could play, I mean, is there any daylight between them that's so significant that like makes you feel like you've got to play one of these other teams versus the other?
No. But here I will say this. I'm going to change my opinion again. I kind of want it to be the Packers for the Cowboys, and then I would like the Rams to be the 6th seed, because we're talking about playoff situations.
Yeah.
If the Rams are the 6th seed, they would be going to play Detroit in round 1. I actually feel really good that the Rams could go into Detroit and beat them. And then assuming the Cowboys were to win, that means that the Cowboys could play the winner of Bucks Philly in round 2. And I love that.
I'll take either of those teams.
Because I'd rather play the Philly the way they are currently constructed, or Tampa Bay, rather than playing Detroit. Although you're not terrified of Detroit, they just beat them. And then maybe you could have, if the Rams were to beat Detroit in round 1, then you've got the Rams going to play San Francisco, and Sean McVay does have a pretty good track record against Kyle Shanahan. So why not?
Yeah, I do think that I will agree with you there that's a good consideration, is that any combination that includes the Rams separately playing San Francisco before we would have to play San Francisco, that would be helpful. I mean, look, it's simply because it would be nice for San Francisco to not have a waltz into the NFC Championship game. But also, there is a chance that the Rams kind of pull off that upset. And
because I don't see Green Bay. Like if Green Bay is I guess they'd be the 6th seed. If they're the 6th seed, they beat Detroit, which they've already done this year. I don't see Green Bay going to San Francisco and beating the 49ers. Heck, they couldn't even do it when they had Aaron Rodgers at his absolute peak, right? Yeah. I definitely don't see them doing it this year. I can see the Rams beat the 49ers.
Man, I mean, it'll be an ugly day in the Aaron Rodgers fandom if Jordan Love does go into San Francisco and beat San Francisco. That's going to be a hard day on the Pat McAfee show. I think if anything, you've laid it out. Like, we have preferences, we have ideas on why one team may be easier than another, or one team may help us with the path down the road than the other. But to me, I think for the most part, they're pretty close. They're all kind of, and that's kind of reflected in what we've seen in the NFL season too, right? Is that all these teams outside of that top kind of top 2 tiers, they're all pretty close.
The 2 seed is just so valuable, because if you look at what the first 2 games could look like, going to Tampa Bay and then playing in San Francisco versus playing at home against Green Bay and then playing at home against Tampa. Like, I mean, there is a real chance that you could play Green Bay and Tampa in back-to-back weeks at home, and that's all you have to do to get to the NFC Championship game. And we've seen plenty of years before where the number 1 seed gets upset in round 2, and it's the number 2 seed hosting the NFC Championship game. that's the path that you want for the Cowboys. It's like Baker Mayfield and Jordan Love coming to Dallas.
This is what we've been asking for and wanting for years. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, like this has been the problem the last 2 seasons. The Cowboys couldn't find a way to break through and get that extra playoff game at home.
Correct.
And look, I understand that the Cowboys lost a playoff game at home, and like you're not guaranteed to win these things. But I also think that this is a much better team playing at home than that team was.
You're also not having MVP Aaron Rodgers coming.
Yeah.
Dallas.
So I think that the NFC is set up for the Cowboys to make a run, in the playoffs. Like if they take care of business, the Cowboys are significantly better than these teams, outside of San Francisco. I do think that we just talked about it. The Cowboys have scary sides of the ball on both sides of the ball. And these teams that we've been comparing, they have one side of the ball covered, and then they're holding on for dear life on the other side of the ball.
Absolutely agree. All right, let's get to one more question, including why do so many teams ditch veterans at this time of the year? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, or you can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub and find the best popular parlays that are out there right now. Plus, there's a futures market. There's the game line. So much to do on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, it's our crossover show with Locked On Commanders. David Harrison and I talking about that game on Sunday. Make sure you tune in for that. But Landon, we've got one more question. And this one comes from @Watson822. He wants to know, why do teams release players this time of year? What are the pros and the cons of releasing a veteran player? And is there any players that you could see being released that could help?
Well, real quick, let's give a quick update, because it does sound like, after speaking yesterday, that the Cowboys have not officially signed La'el Collins yet, or Damian Lewis, or
Damian Wilson.
Right? Damian Wilson. No, I didn't do it right. Because I think it sounds like there's still some contract stuff working through, which is funny because La'el Collins did have an Instagram post saying he's coming home. So we'll see how that all works.
I wonder if they're trying to get this to be a 2-year deal. Like the rest, we're going to pay you week by week to be on the practice squad this year, but we also want you to come back next year so we can have you in the building to get you in shape.
Yeah, that makes some sense. I think it does feel like a kind of, we have a sticking point in the contract kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure they'll work it out. But it is funny that La'el, already did the Instagram post,
which basically
really took away all the leverage that his agent has. So, which is pretty funny. I think, look, the reason that the kind of roster stuff goes the way it does at the end of the season is all based on where your team thinks they are, right? If you're going into the playoffs, you're a buyer, right? Like, because you want to try to make sure your team is deep enough that you have the depth, that you've got all the players you need to kind of get through the playoffs to, if something were to happen. You think about the nightmare scenario that's San Francisco's faced when they played Philadelphia in the NFC Championship. Obviously, that's quarterback, so it's a whole other thing. But I think that kind of gives you an idea of why teams are kicking tires on veterans that are being cut and that sort of thing. The question is, why do teams cut these guys at the end of the year? And I think that the reason that the teams do that is contract guarantees,
roster bonuses. I think Dalvin Cook was he had $440,000 bonus if he was on the roster in week 18, which is no thanks.
Yeah. And as teams get to the end of the season too, as they start to realize, okay, we're not in the playoffs, we're vying for a draft spot. You kind of cut some of your dead weight, some of the veterans off your roster that maybe you're not going to bring back, or that that you need the roster spot for, because teams that are kind of rebuilding or know that they're going into a rebuilding mode, they'll start buying up practice squad players, young players that they like on other teams, and try to hold them onto their roster so they have them throughout the offseason in their program. So you'll see the kind of the Washington Commanders, the Chicago Bears of the world, these teams that are clearly out of the playoffs, that don't have anything more to play for necessarily, but are trying to kind of rebuild their teams. You'll see them start shedding some players and then start gobbling up players from practice squads that they liked, or just futures type guys that they want to develop. And so it's kind of a weird exchange of between the good and the bad teams, right? That the bad teams are like, oh, well, we have this one veteran. He's at the end of the year, so maybe we cut him so he can hop onto a good roster, and we want to sign a guy or two anyway, so we need that roster spot. So it actually usually ends up working out quite well for both sides. And that's usually the mechanics behind why it's happening at this point.
And you'll also see some of the really good teams that know that they're like one of the top 6 or 7 teams in the NFL. They'll start to sign guys that they know can play for them for 3 or 4 game stretches. I think the perfect example of this was Eric Weddle when he got signed by the Rams in 2021. Didn't play all season, and then he gets signed in week 18, plays a bunch of snaps, and ends up becoming a starter for the Rams, over the next 3 games.
And a legend too. Rams legend, because he had several interceptions, didn't he? I mean, he played really, really well. So
you're going to see some of that this week. And maybe that's what the Cowboys are doing with Lyle Collins. Over the course of the year, TJ Bass is a better option because he's younger, he's healthier, he can get you through kind of that long stretch of the season. But if you just need Lyle Collins for a 2-game stretch, he's probably the better option. We saw last year T.Y. Hilton did this for the Cowboys. Now he came in a little bit earlier. He came in, was right around, I guess that was a couple weeks before Christmas, but
November.
It's kind of same thing. You're going to see that across the league. Guys just renting viable NFL players for the next month to help them chase a championship.
Yeah. And exactly the kind of thing that Cooks is probably going to get somewhere, right? Dalvin Cook. Well, maybe. We'll see. According to Ian Rappaport, that's exactly. He's now fresh, so teams can use him for a big playoff run. Sure.
So we'll see. I do think you'll see a couple other names pop up over the next couple of weeks. I'm sure you'll see some veterans get cut over the next couple of days that might be able to jump on playoff teams. So keep your eye on that. I know somebody asked about Martavis Bryant. If is he somebody the Cowboys were saving for the playoffs? My guess is no there.
I think that what the idea was is that, his situation is different, right? Because he wasn't with a team necessarily, right? He became available. And I think the Cowboys are viewing him in a very similar sense, though. I do think that, that's a good thought process, that they are viewing him as let's get him on our roster and just, get him healthy and see what he can do. And maybe in the offseason, he can develop into something. So I think he is kind of a very early version of that late season signing to kind of bring into the fold and just see what happens.
Really quickly, just for fun, if there was one player out there that's a free agent that the Cowboys could bring in for the next 3 weeks for a playoff run,
you know the answer, Marcus.
I mean, is it Rolando McClain?
It's Rolando McClain. Yes, of course.
I was going to see how old is Sean Lee now? Oh, he's 37.
Oh my God, no, he's too old. And listen, he's been out in California, not doing football things. There's a reason we haven't heard from him. I have a feeling that he's enjoying.
Do you know Rolando McClain and Sean Lee were in the same draft?
That's right. Yeah, that's actually, I do know that.
But I think
I also know that Rolando McClain is a freak of nature athlete. That look, Sean Lee is incredible, but Sean Lee is not the same kind of physical specimen.
Right. I want to hear your guys. Who are the listeners out there? Just tell us one guy you wish the Cowboys could sign for a 3-week playoff run to help him get to the Super Bowl. I want to hear your names. But that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the podcast on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Landon does an awesome job with the Locked On Now. So the one of you and your daughter just cracked me up. I couldn't stop laughing. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we will see you right back here tomorrow with the crossover Thursday edition of the show. See you then.